This crisis needs leadership, really.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
And in Providence, this challenge that we have with a convicted sex offender who's hanging out in the Washington Park neighborhood, this challenge does require leadership. Now, leadership is, I guess, in the mind of the leader, because we've had some real knee-jerk reaction on the part of the mayor, only to be doubled down by his opponent. We have a clear mind. You know where that comes from? That's a Jackson Browne song. Remember the song Cocaine? It takes a clear mind. Not that we're engaged in cocaine here, but Andrew Horowitz from the Rutgers University School of Law is here. He's not a guy who worries very much about what people think. He just kind of says things that are pretty smart and mostly true. And I think we need a little cold shower, and the neighborhood should take some notes this evening on the realities of the situation. It's a pleasure to have you aboard. Thanks very much for tuning in. Everyone's a little tense. You know why? Because the Mega Millions is what, at $1.6 billion, and every organization I belong to or employed by is trying to group buy lottery tickets all over the place. And I'm actually somebody who's given speeches about you don't want to win the lottery. It'll just ruin your life. But all I do is check the office to make sure I got my $2 in, because I don't want to be, even though I don't want to win this thing, I do not want to be the guy who's out, because everyone's going to quit at work and there'll be too much to do. Anyway, good luck to you. Yay. And good luck to the Sox on game one. If you're watching at midnight, you've already seen them probably win game one. Okay. A couple of things. We're down. We have a little technical issue. We don't have much video today, but we do have some headlines that I want to show you. The Trump migrant caravan headline is just, it's, you know what? This is getting ridiculous. This president is now suggesting that all you have to do is get into the middle of this caravan and you will find Middle Eastern terrorists and MS-13 gang members. Unfortunately for the president, there are slews of journalists who are traveling with this Honduran march, and guess what? Nobody can find any of them. Now, who's to say with 7,000 people moving up through Mexico that there aren't going to be a few troublemakers along the way? You'd have to be a real idiot not to think that that's the case. But this isn't even the politicization of the situation. This is just screaming fire in a crowded theater. And even Republicans and Republican Trumpers out there have got to say to themselves, this is a little bit too much. I mean, I've got this vision of this at the border. You know, by the way, a 1,500-mile trek, how many do you think are going to get there, number one? Empathy? Compassion? Policy discussion about what causes these people maybe to want to come through Mexico? I don't know. I don't know what happened in the last 26 months of my life when everything I say makes you think I'm a bleeding heart liberal. Okay? Anyway, next issue, coming home. We're getting down the stretch, right? 15 days till, or 14 working days till the election day, 2 weeks from today. Fung and Raimondo ads are getting after each other in a big way. What's really cracking me up, though, are Alan Fung's ads. He put a new one out, and I apologize because the video's down today, but you can catch it online or on television, where he's got some television news clips mixed in with Joe Trillo, and he advances the idea that it's a conspiracy between Raimondo and Trillo to take votes away from Fung. Now, I think you'd just have to be a simple mathematician to understand that Joe Trillo probably does hurt Alan Fung in this race, no doubt. But I'm going to offer some no-charge consultancy to Alan Fung. Rather than alleging conspiracy, maybe you just want to do a nice, comfortable commercial. Just you, on the screen. See, this is my political consultancy business at work here. Just a nice little commercial where, Alan, you get on the screen, you say, hey, listen, Joe Trillo has the right to run for office. It's America. We have free speech, and everyone has the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, or the governorship. But the truth is that he's more akin to me, and every time you vote for Joe Trillo, you are taking a vote away from me. So if you want to take Gina Raimondo out of office, you really have to dismiss his candidacy. Nothing personal, but that's just the way it goes. Gee, you think maybe would look at that, people would look at that and say, well, that makes sense. Rather than alleging conspiracies and high drama, and it's just the way Fung operates, which is why I told you at the beginning of this campaign, he's no more than a B- player, acting like a D+ player. And he's going to get walloped. And the GOP national money is pulled out of the state because they know it. Good Lordy Lou. Anyway, in the town yesterday, oh, by the way, not to be outdone, Joe Trillo put out a press release. He's copying me on everything. Every time I put out an initiative, he copies me on it. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you run down the press release and the news story around it, he's actually right. I mean, every time Joe Trillo has started, for instance, he's big on the animal rights. As soon as he started talking about animal rights, Alan Fung's campaign came out with Pause for Fung, P-A-W-S. When he talked about an inspector general, Alan Fung came right in behind him. It's true. Trillo was talking about revamping the DMV. Fung comes right in behind him. It's true. But Joe, you can't say it publicly. You look like a third grader who says, hey, you stole my homework. You can't. Yeah, right? I love Joe, but good Lordy Lou. And lastly, in the news, the Fane Tower. Not for nothing. I'm about growth, and I'm a major league capitalist, and I'm all about jobs, too. And I love to see people have a nice place to live, and I love the downtown atmosphere. I just don't understand the design of this sucker. I really don't. It looks like a bad toothpick sticking out of the city's, skyscraper's cityscape. There you go. Let the city of Providence work this thing out. But has anybody actually said this thing looks weird? Just saying. Maybe a design, a little bit more modification, a little bit of a more meld into the cityscape might be a good idea. So the other night, there was a community meeting in Washington Park, which, for those of you who are lifelong Rhode Islanders but don't know where anything is unless I just tell you how to get there without names. Roger Williams campus on the Bay? A couple of blocks up toward downtown is the Washington Park neighborhood, and New York Avenue is the site where a convicted sex offender by the name of Mr. Gardner showed up living with his fiancée, who he has since married, I guess, this weekend, word is. Congratulations to him. He should be in jail for the rest of his life based on what the convictions were and how the sentencing worked out, but there was some breakup in the due process bureaucracy, and it turned up that he was let out of jail. You can go through all the details, but it seems like it's been like mistake after mistake. Notwithstanding the arguments about how long we should keep these people in jail, and my guest certainly has thoughts on that. In the meantime, he moved from Massachusetts down to this place, and the neighborhood went nuts when somebody in the police department let somebody in the neighborhood know. And they've been protesting pretty much regularly at dusk every night, screaming him out of the place. And Mayor Elorza, on the first eve of the neighborhood get-together, I guess looked at the calendar, saw Election Day right in front of him, and did this.
He does not belong in our city. He does not belong in our community.
And then he promised 24/7 surveillance by the police. Professor Horowitz, it is always a pleasure, sir.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
You said something on the radio last week that relieved me, that someone else would have the temerity and the objectivity to say, what? Right? That was crazy. Promising 24/7 surveillance and saying that the guy didn't belong in the city. By the way, that doesn't make us fans of sex offense when we
No, not at all, obviously. But yeah, I was incredibly disappointed in Mayor Elorza. I consider him a friend. I've been a supporter. I don't, for the life of me, understand that
member,
he was a
Williams?
colleague of mine, which is how we became friends. I can't for the life of me imagine what he was thinking. It's an incredibly irresponsible act of non-leadership, adding fuel to a vigilante, angry mob fire. His job was to do the opposite, and I don't understand it.
Okay, leave it there. When we come back, we're going to discuss what the constitutional, legal, and practical issues are here. Stay with us. So again, the headlines, and you can see the house and the neighbors. Again, we're talking about this sex offender who has been let out of jail. I mean, the nuances of the story are important to people because they feel like he should never have been let out of jail. I think it's a waste of time, though. He's out of jail, and he has the constitutional protection that you and I have.
He does.
So living in a home, although it worries people, is his constitutional right. Zero base this thing. If it all just came to be, and the neighborhood was just expressing some concerns, and you were able to speak to them in front of any kind of protest, organizational stuff, or political play on the part of the mayor, you would advise them what?
To leave the man alone, to let him live his life.
Easy for you to say, you liberal commie. You know?
Perhaps. Except that it's supported by data, right? If we try and look at this thing rationally, what the data tells us about all people coming out of prison, but sex offenders as well, is their best chance for reintegration into productive society is stable housing, access to support services, stable employment. And in the case of sex offenders, we do all of it wrong. We make it virtually impossible for a sex offender to find stable housing. We pass law after law. Now in Providence, Aponte is apparently proposing another one.
The council,
to make
right.
it, Councilman Aponte.
Wants to put it 500 feet.
To make it impossible for somebody to find housing.
Since you mentioned, I should say,
it's
right now the law is 300 feet. He wants to make it 500 feet, that you can't live near a school, place where children are, And in a concentrated metropolitan area, 500 feet, there's something within 500 feet everywhere.
Right, and particularly where affordable housing is located. And of course, somebody who is coming out of a very long prison term is going to require affordable housing, particularly since nobody will employ this person. So we do everything we can to maximize the chances of recidivism. In addition to being cruel and inhumane, it's simply foolish and counter to our interests. So to answer your question, that's what I would say to a community group who would never listen to me. But I would say, if you want to actually reduce the risk and reduce the danger, treat him like a human being, leave him alone, give him a job, let him live, let him go to work, let him access counseling without being harassed. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, the emotions run so high on this particular matter, and then people lose their minds because they're worried about their kids. One of the interesting parts of this, I only laugh, I'm not laughing at anybody, but I'm laughing at the idea. This tells you how twisted everybody gets over this. They're most concerned about Halloween. I mean, if there's ever a night when this guy's checkmated,
right,
it's Halloween night.
Right.
There are adults all over the street. There are, the security would be there knowing he's there anyway, never mind the 24/7 that the mayor ordered. We'll talk about that. But that's the level that people are at.
Right. It's visceral. It's not rational. I mean, if you cared and looked at the data, you would see that the overwhelming majority of child sex abuse offenses are not committed by a man like Mr. Gardner, some stranger who grabs your kid. The overwhelming majority are people preying upon children who they know, and they know the children. So grandpa, uncle, stepfather, employee at the daycare center, priest, those are the much more likely dangerous people. We happen to know about Mr. Gardner.
Did you have to throw the priest in there?
Well, perhaps I shouldn't have, but it is a reality, unfortunately, that we live with. So, we happen to know about Mr. Gardner. We don't happen to know about all of the other offenders. And we also don't particularly seem to worry about people who've committed other crimes.
Well, we do know that we know what he was convicted of.
We do.
I mean, this was the guy that may not have known the kids. Who was entering facilities, taking kids hostage, kidnapping. I mean, this was everybody's #1 worst nightmare.
You bet.
And would be named as a level 3 offender if the law applied to him. But he predates Megan's law.
Right.
By the way, Megan's Law is another well-intended mess, because it seems to me that all you got to do is find out that someone's in the neighborhood at level 2 or 3, and it probably manifests you spending more time at the shrink, and the neighborhood loses 30% of its real estate value, because everyone is in a tizzy, right?
Right.
I don't know what that law does, other than soothe the notion that you are now aware, and so you'll be more careful with your children, as if you're not careful with your children now.
I actually think it creates a very false sense of security and enhances danger for just those reasons.
Meaning?
If you believe that you know where the sex offenders are, and you believe that somehow that means you can behave differently with your children, you're mistaken, because you don't know where they are. You know where some who have been highlighted and some who have been prosecuted are located. That's what you know. You don't know who's living where and what folks are up to. So I'm agreeing with your premise, which is one ought to be on heightened awareness all the time.
We'll come back and talk about what I've said about this for a long time, though. Where are we? Over here, I guess. We should, there we are. We should have a conversation with my guest, with Andrew, about what I have said for many years, that the answer is to throw the key away. I know he doesn't agree with me on that. We'll be right back.
He does not belong in our city. He does not belong in our community.
So there is the convicted sex offender in a modern video. I mean, he's got some young photos. And of course, you can see the neighbors that are just absolutely beside themselves, understandably. Major LePayton, by the way, is the guy next to Elorza, Mayor Elorza. And he looks like, he was like, oh, here we go. The reporting from Dan McGowan, authoritypri.com, best reporter we have in Providence, covering Providence, is certain that, and he's got it multiply sourced, that Mayor Elorza prepped nobody about this, and just went in there and promised 24/7 surveillance, which is nuts. I mean, I don't know what kind of budget buster that is for 30, 60 days, but in perpetuity, that's a big problem. And now Elorza even admits that the IRS is important in protecting the offender's safety as the neighborhood.
Yeah, when it was rolled out, the implication of it was, we're going to follow this guy, essentially to harass him, in addition to sort of allegedly preventing him from committing offenses. The notion that that's what police are for, is to harass somebody and chase them out of a neighborhood, was appalling to me. Now I think they are required to do 24/7 protection, because they have fueled the fires, and people are, he's going to get hurt.
So surveillance turns into protection.
Correct.
What is your constitutional, and you're a smart guy in the Constitution and the law, what is the constitutional applicability of this? You know, at what juncture does this guy have a complaint that he's being harassed by governments?
I think if the government follows him every time he leaves his house, and it is not for the purpose of protecting his safety, I think it's an abuse of governmental power, and I do think he would have a legitimate complaint that he's being harassed by the Providence Police Department.
Not to be outdone, Divi Whitman, who is the independent candidate running against Jorge Elorza in a Channel 10 debate over the weekend, suggested that while Elorza was losing his mind, in my words, it was absolutely ridiculous to promise 24/7 coverage and the like. Her solution is to set up a meeting with the suspect or the convicted sex offender, Mr. Gardner, and suggest to him that she would like him to leave.
And where she thinks he would go and be better received is hard to imagine.
What is that?
Yeah. Well, it's so we've got two candidates for mayor, neither of whom is showing any legitimate leadership on this issue.
So define for me. By the way, people were dialing into the radio show yesterday suggesting that you could, initiate GoFundMe efforts to raise money to buy him out of the neighborhood, which I probably think is at least less civilly or criminally problematic. If you throw some money in front of him. What is this notion of the practical leadership, and what of my thought that we ought to throw the key away on these things? So, because frankly, when these folks get out, other than just hoping and that the community will change them and that their lives have been somewhat improved while incarcerated, it's a total crapshoot, and it drives everybody crazy. Should we have bigger sentences, longer or life sentences for a significant sex offense? Why do you think not?
Well, bigger is hard to say. Life, I mean, the comment you made the other day that I responded to was lock them up, throw away the key. And I don't agree with that.
It's a sentencing argument.
Yes, I understand. I just don't, I fundamentally believe that most people are redeemable, that they're entitled to an opportunity to be redeemed. Mr. Gardner's been in prison for 20 years. He's received services and treatment inside that facility. If we have any faith, if we think that that means anything, if we think that the aging process means anything, and by the way, there certainly is, with respect to other offenses, significant data that aging significantly reduces recidivism. You know, yeah, it's a crapshoot. I don't disagree with that notion. But there are lots of people who are wandering in our streets, living in our neighborhoods, who are capable of criminal activity. Life is about balancing risks. I mean, if we really wanted to avoid risk, none of us would ever get in an airplane, none of us would ever get in an automobile. We live with risk, and so we have to decide as a society how much risk is worth tolerating and at what cost.
Well, the other thing I think that we got to point out is that while Mr. Gardner may be one story, there are as many as 300 level 2 and 3 sex offenders in the city of Providence. And what does Mayor Lorza do, or what does Ms. Whitman do next time? Another 24/7 surveillance? I mean, the idea that, okay, one down, 298 to go, tempered realism, I think, is the only form of leadership, right?
Yes,
right?
I agree. I mean, if you actually took all of our police resources and dedicated them to following around known offenders, you wouldn't have police patrolling the streets, you wouldn't have detectives available to do investigations.
So your 30-second moral of the story is what?
He's done his time. We have to have some faith and belief in our rehabilitative system of our prisons. We have to have some faith that people are capable of change, particularly if we give them an incentive to change. We're not particularly giving Mr. Gardner an incentive to change, but if we give people an incentive to change by promising a decent, productive life with a safe, secure place to live, a place to work, many, many people, the majority of people, will respond favorably to that and go on to live very productive lives. I know many, many ex-offenders who now live incredibly productive, helpful lives, serving the community, raising their families. People are entitled to that opportunity.
Appreciate your perspective. Thanks.
My pleasure.
We actually moved the professor in tonight in lieu of another program, which will air this week, and I'll tell you about that when we come back. Stay with us. So yes, I told you that we were going to talk about the Warwick firefighter sick pay conversation. Shuffled the deck, the schedule. We are actually going to have that program on Thursday with Ken Block and Rob Cody, citizen watchdogs. All right, so make a note of that. Tomorrow night, a young lady who's had some turbulence with the state Republican Party. And we'll talk to you, of course, at 3 o'clock on the radio tomorrow until 6 on WPRO. Bye.